In the bustling heart of Lumora, a city where dreams are forged and fortunes won, stands Amadi, a man whose life seems carved from the very essence of success. His name resonates in the halls of innovation, the mastermind behind a trailblazing tech company that has redefined its industry. He resides in a sleek penthouse that gazes over the city's dazzling skyline, a symbol of the empire he has built with his own hands. The world sees him as the epitome of achievement, a man who has it all. By his side is Leona, his wife, a woman of rare elegance and grace. Her radiant smile has graced countless galas, her wit and poise making her the center of every gathering she attends. Together, they are the envy of Lumora, a power couple who embody the city's promise of prosperity and prestige. Yet, beneath the glittering surface of Amadi's life lies a question he cannot silence, a whisper that grows louder in the quiet moments when the city's hum fades away. It is not a question of business or wealth, but of love. Is Leona the same woman when no one is watching? Amadi often finds himself lost in thought, replaying the scenes of their life together. He sees her kindness in public, the way she lights up a room with her charm, and the effortless way she carries their image as a perfect couple. But there are moments, fleeting, almost imperceptible, when her eyes seem to hold a shadow he cannot decipher. In those moments, a chasm opens in his heart, filled with doubt and longing. He wonders if he has truly known the woman he shares his life with, or if he has fallen in love with an illusion crafted for the world's gaze. Is their love a masterpiece of authenticity, or a beautiful mirage that begins to waver under the weight of scrutiny? The city of Lumora, with its ceaseless energy and relentless pace, mirrors the turmoil within him. He knows he must confront the truth, whatever it may be. For behind the facade of perfection, Amadi seeks something far greater than success or admiration. He seeks the unshakable bond of a love that remains constant, even when the spotlight dims. And so, as the nights grow longer and the city glows brighter, Amadi embarks on a journey of discovery. It is a journey not into the streets of Lumora, but into the quiet spaces of his own heart and the soul of the woman he calls his own. What he will find there remains to be seen, but one thing is certain: the answer to his question will change everything. Amadi's suspicion wasn't born from jealousy or mistrust, but rather from an unsettling tapestry woven with fleeting moments, instances so subtle that they might have gone unnoticed by anyone else. A sharp word that cut through the harmony of a dinner party, a dismissive gesture when she thought no one was looking, or the faintest flicker of impatience in her otherwise serene demeanor. At first he dismissed them, chalking them up to the stresses of their shared, high-profile life. But as the moments piled up like fragile, precariously stacked stones, they formed a foundation of doubt that Amadi could no longer ignore. The idea nagged at him in the quiet hours, its whispers growing louder in the spaces between their words and silences. Was Leona's warmth, her charm, her boundless kindness a carefully curated performance? Was it possible that the woman he adored was not the same person behind closed doors? It was a question too heavy to carry alone, a storm brewing in his heart that threatened to consume him. Amadi needed clarity, he needed guidance, and so he turned to the one man whose wisdom had been a constant anchor in his life, his uncle, Papa Udo. Papa Udo was a man of timeless strength and quiet authority, a figure who had weathered storms that Amadi could scarcely imagine. His presence alone brought a kind of calm, as though the world itself steadied under his gaze. A retired fisherman who now spent his days tending to his garden in a small village on the outskirts of Lumora, Papa Udo was a keeper of stories, a sage whose words carried the weight of generations. He had seen love in all its forms, its beauty, its trials, its capacity to heal and to wound. As Amadi drove the long, winding road to his uncle's humble home, the cityscape of Lumora gave way to the serenity of the countryside. The golden glow of the setting sun painted the landscape in hues of amber and crimson, a stark contrast to the turbulence in his heart. When he arrived, Papa Udo greeted him with a warm smile, his weathered hands gripping Amadi's shoulders in a firm embrace. "Ah, my boy," Papa Udo said, his voice deep and steady. "You carry a storm within you today. Speak, and let me help you find the calm." Over a simple meal of roasted plantains and spicy pepper soup, Amadi poured out his heart. He spoke of Leona's radiant public persona and the small cracks he feared might betray something deeper. His words tumbled out raw and unfiltered, his voice tinged with both pain and hope. Papa Udo listened without interruption, his sharp eyes never leaving Amadi's face. When the younger man finished, the old fisherman leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Amadi," he began, his voice carrying the rhythm of the tides he had once sailed. "A person's true self is like the ocean, calm on the surface but hiding currents beneath. Love is not about finding perfection, it is about understanding the tides. If you want to know who Leona truly is, you must look beyond what you see. Look to her actions when she believes no one is watching, for that is where the truth lies." Amadi nodded, his uncle's words sinking deep into his heart. The path ahead was not an easy one, but he knew it was necessary. With Papa Udo's blessing and a renewed resolve, he returned to Lumora, determined to uncover the truth, not to confirm his doubts, but to see his wife as she truly was, beyond the masks and beneath the surface. What he would find remained unknown, but Amadi understood one thing clearly. The strength of their love, and perhaps his own, would be tested in the days to come. Papa Udo leaned forward, his piercing gaze meeting Amadi's troubled eyes. The crackling of the fire between them seemed to echo the weight of their conversation. "So, you want to test her heart, Amadi?" he said, his voice low and deliberate, like the steady rhythm of waves against a shore. "Remember, the answers you seek may not be the ones you want. The truth is not always a bomb. It can be a blade." Amadi swallowed hard, his fists clenched on the table. "I need to know, Uncle," he said, his voice thick with resolve. "I need to see her as she truly is, when she thinks no one important is watching. Only then will I find peace." Papa Udo sat back, his weathered face thoughtful. He ran his hand over his beard, the flickering firelight casting shadows that danced across his features. After a long pause, he nodded. "Very well, my boy. If this is the path your heart demands, then I will walk it with you. But tread carefully. What you uncover may change everything." The night stretched long as the two men talked, crafting a plan that was as simple as it was profound. Papa Udo, with his unassuming wisdom and keen insight into human nature, would disguise himself as a struggling street vendor. He would station himself near the grand gates of Amadi's sprawling estate, his weathered hands tending to a modest stall of handmade wares, beads, trinkets, and carvings crafted from the natural beauty of the countryside. His humble appearance, coupled with the vulnerability of his role, would act as a mirror. How Leona treated him, this old man seemingly of no importance, would reveal the truth of her heart. Would she offer him the same kindness and warmth she so effortlessly displayed in the grand halls of Lumora's elite? Or would her smile falter, her charm crumble, when the stage was stripped away? The plan required precision and patience. Papa Udo would arrive in the city at dawn, setting up his stall in the shadows of the estate's towering walls. Amadi, meanwhile, would observe from a distance, his heart pounding with anticipation and dread. As the first rays of sunlight painted the city in golden hues, Papa Udo's transformation was complete. Gone was the dignified elder who had guided Amadi through life's trials. In his place stood a humble man in tattered clothes, his face lined with the weariness of a hard life. He carried a small cart laden with his wares, each piece a testament to his skill and the quiet dignity of his craft. He positioned himself just outside the estate, his calloused hands arranging his trinkets with care. The city began to wake around him, the hum of life growing louder as Lumora's residents stepped into the day. Among them, Leona emerged, radiant as ever, her presence commanding attention even in the quiet moments of her routine. Papa Udo waited, his demeanor unassuming, his eyes sharp. As Leona approached, his voice rang out, low and earnest. "Good morning, my lady. Perhaps you'd care to look at my wares. Fine work, crafted with love and care." Leona paused, her gaze flickering to the humble vendor. For a moment, her expression was unreadable. Then she stepped closer, her features softening into a smile. "Good morning," she said, her voice melodic. "What do you have here?" Amadi, watching from a discreet distance, held his breath. His heart raced as the scene unfolded, his mind a storm of questions. Would this be the moment his doubts were confirmed or dispelled? What followed would leave him questioning not only the woman he loved, but also himself and the lens through which he viewed the world. The first encounter was a quiet storm, subtle yet revealing. As the morning sun bathed the grand gates of the estate in its golden light, Papa Udo stood patiently, his cart of trinkets arranged with care. His back was slightly hunched, a calculated posture of humility that blended seamlessly with his worn clothes and weathered face. He waited with the patience of a man who had seen much and expected little, his keen eyes trained on the cobblestone path leading from the estate. It wasn't long before Leona appeared, her presence as commanding as ever. She stepped out gracefully, her designer heels clicking softly against the stones, her attire a perfect balance of elegance and ease. To any passerby, she was a vision of sophistication, a woman who seemed untouchable in her radiance. But Papa Udo knew better than to be dazzled by appearances. As she approached, he straightened slightly, his voice rich with warmth and humility. "Good morning, my lady," he called out, his tone inviting yet deferential. "Might I interest you in some of my wares, handmade with love and care? Each piece tells a story." Leona slowed her stride, her gaze flickering toward the old vendor. For a brief moment her expression was unreadable, a fleeting pause that could have been curiosity, annoyance, or indifference. Then her lips pressed into a thin line, and her eyes darted away as though he were invisible. "I'm not interested," she said curtly, her voice carrying an edge that sliced through the warmth of the morning. Her hand dipped into her handbag, pulling out a single coin, which she tossed toward him with the same casualness one might reserve for discarding an old receipt. It clinked against the wooden edge of his cart before rolling onto the ground, spinning in a tight circle before settling in the dirt. Papa Udo bent down slowly, retrieving the coin with deliberate care. He kept his expression neutral, though his sharp eyes missed nothing, not the way her chin tilted slightly upward in disdain, nor the way her heels clicked a fraction faster as she walked away, eager to distance herself from the encounter. From his vantage point, hidden behind a shaded corner, Amadi's chest tightened. He had hoped, prayed, for a different outcome. The scene played out in his mind over and over again, her cold tone, her averted gaze, the dismissive flick of her hand. Was this the woman he had fallen in love with, the woman who could light up any room with her charm? Or was this someone else entirely, a version of her hidden beneath layers of carefully constructed grace? As Leona disappeared down the street, Papa Udo straightened and glanced briefly toward Amadi's hiding spot. Their eyes met, and in that moment, no words were necessary. The truth was written in the small, quiet details of the encounter, details that spoke louder than any grand gesture. Papa Udo sighed softly and returned to his cart, rearranging his wares as though nothing had happened. But in his heart, he carried the weight of what he had just witnessed. He had agreed to this plan to help his nephew find clarity, yet now he wondered if the clarity would bring comfort or heartbreak. Amadi lingered in the shadows, torn between the urge to confront Leona and the need to see more. The first encounter had been revealing, but it was just that, the first. He needed to know if this was an anomaly or the truth of her character, and so he resolved to wait, to watch, and to uncover the answer, no matter how much it might wound him. As the day wore on, the estate gates remained a stage, and the humble vendor a silent sentinel, ready to reflect whatever truths lay hidden beneath the surface. Each day, Papa Udo stood at his makeshift stall, a quiet observer in the grand drama unfolding at the gates of Amadi's estate. To the world, he was merely an old street vendor, offering humble wares in exchange for a few coins, but to Amadi, hidden in the shadows nearby, he was a mirror, reflecting truths that had long remained concealed. Leona emerged from the estate each morning, a picture of poise and elegance. Her hair was always impeccably styled, her clothes a seamless blend of luxury and sophistication. To the neighbors, to the passers-by, and to the ever-watchful world of Lumora's elite, she was perfection personified. But Papa Udo saw what lay beneath the surface. Her charm, so luminous in public, seemed to wither when faced with someone she deemed insignificant. Papa Udo's warm greetings were met with curt nods or cold indifference. His polite inquiries were brushed aside as though they were an inconvenience. And on one particularly telling morning, as she hurried past without so much as a glance, she muttered under her breath, "Why do they allow these people so close to the estate?" It was a small comment, easily lost in the hum of the city, but to Papa Udo it spoke volumes. And to Amadi, who overheard it from his concealed vantage point, it was like a blade carving through his heart. Each interaction revealed more. There was the day Papa Udo offered her a small carved figurine, a symbol of goodwill and gratitude, saying, "For you, my lady, no charge, it is a gift." She took it in her manicured fingers, studied it with a faint air of disdain, and handed it back. "I have no need for such things," she said simply before walking away. There was another day when Papa Udo dropped a basket of his wares as she passed. The colorful beads and trinkets spilled onto the cobblestones, scattering in all directions. Leona, pausing briefly, looked down at the mess, her expression unreadable. For a moment it seemed as though she might bend to help. But instead, she stepped around the fallen items and continued on her way, her heels clicking sharply against the stones. To Amadi, watching from the shadows, the scene was both surreal and devastating. This was not the Leona he knew. Or rather, this was not the Leona he thought he knew, the woman who could captivate a room with her warmth and laughter, the woman who made him believe in the beauty of love, was now a stranger to him in these small, unscripted moments. Papa Udo, ever the patient observer, bore witness to it all. Each interaction, each cold word, each dismissive gesture painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. At the end of each day, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the city was bathed in twilight, he would return to Amadi with quiet eyes and a heavy heart. "She carries beauty on her face, but not in her actions," Papa Udo said one evening, his voice soft but firm. "The way one treats those they deem unimportant speaks louder than any grand display. What you see now, my boy, is the truth, piece by painful piece." Amadi sat in silence, the weight of his uncle's words settling over him like a shroud. He had wanted clarity, and now he had it, but the clarity brought no comfort, only questions. Had he been blind to this side of her all along? Or had he fallen in love with an illusion, a reflection of what he wanted to see rather than what truly was? As the days turned into weeks, Amadi's heart wrestled with the revelations. He wanted to believe there was more to her, a depth hidden behind the walls she had built. But with each passing day, the cracks in the facade grew wider, and the truth became harder to deny. The moment of revelation arrived in the most unexpected way, as if fate itself had conspired to unveil the truth. An accident, a contrived mishap carefully orchestrated by Papa Udo and Amadi, created the perfect storm. A spill near the estate gates left Papa Udo seemingly injured, forcing Leona, much to her discomfort, to invite the old vendor into her pristine home. Her discomfort was palpable from the moment he stepped through the grand doors. The vendor's tattered appearance stood in stark contrast to the gleaming marble floors and crystal chandeliers of the estate. Leona's smile was strained, her politeness a fragile mask barely concealing her disdain. She directed the staff to fetch him water and a chair, careful to keep her distance. "Please, sit," she said, her voice clipped. "We'll ensure you're well enough to leave soon." Papa Udo, ever calm, lowered himself into the chair, his weathered hands clasping the glass of water offered by a servant. He looked around the room, his sharp eyes taking in the luxury, the opulence, and the air of superiority that hung heavy in the space. He waited, patient and deliberate, as the room filled with more than just Leona's presence. Amadi's trusted circle of friends and family began to arrive, their faces a mix of curiosity and quiet tension. They were not here by chance. Each had been carefully invited by Amadi under the pretense of a family dinner. They greeted Leona warmly, masking their awareness of the unfolding plan, and settled around the long dining table. The atmosphere grew heavier with each passing moment. As dinner was served, the tension in the air became almost tangible. Leona, seated at the head of the table, maintained her composure, but her discomfort was evident. She cast wary glances at the old vendor, now seated inconspicuously near the table's end. Her attempts to steer the conversation toward light-hearted topics faltered under the weight of the silent anticipation shared by the others. And then the moment came. Papa Udo rose slowly from his chair, the room falling silent as all eyes turned to him. He reached up, his hands peeling away the layers of his disguise. The tattered clothes were discarded, revealing the proud and dignified figure beneath. His weathered face, now free of pretense, looked directly at Leona, his gaze unwavering. "Leona," he said, his voice steady and firm, cutting through the silence like a blade. "Do you recognize me now, or was I invisible to you all along?" The color drained from Leona's face as the truth began to dawn on her. She glanced around the room, her eyes searching for an anchor, but finding only the watchful gazes of Amadi's friends and family. Her mouth opened as if to speak, but no words came. Amadi, seated at the other end of the table, rose to his feet. His expression was a mixture of sorrow and resolve. "Leona," he began, his voice low but resonant, "this is Papa Udo, the man who has been more of a father to me than anyone else in this world. The man you dismissed, belittled, and ignored outside these gates was not a stranger. He was my uncle. He was my test for the truth." Leona's eyes filled with a mixture of shock and indignation. "Amadi, I didn't know. I didn't realize—" "That's the point," Amadi interrupted, his voice sharper now. "You didn't realize because you didn't care to. The kindness you reserve for those you think matter disappears the moment you face someone you believe does not." The room remained silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air like an unspoken judgment. Papa Udo, his face calm but resolute, added, "Kindness, my dear, is not meant for the stage. It is meant for the unseen moments, for those who cannot offer you anything in return." What you choose to do in those moments speaks the truth of who you are. Leona's hands trembled as she clutched the edge of the table, her carefully constructed world beginning to crack under the pressure of the revelation. The room's occupants watched in silence, their expressions a mix of sadness and quiet understanding. Amadi took a deep breath, his voice softening but losing none of its firmness. I wanted to believe in us, Leona. I wanted to believe that what we had was real. But now, I don't know if I can. Leona's gaze dropped, her carefully crafted poise crumbling at last. The silence stretched on, heavy and unyielding. The room fell into an uneasy silence, the kind that seemed to stretch beyond time itself. Every sound, the faint clink of a glass, the subtle rustle of clothing, was swallowed by the weight of what had just transpired. Leona's face was pale, her carefully constructed composure shattered as the eyes of Amadi's family and friends bore into her. In that moment, she was laid bare, not the poised, radiant woman they had known, but someone forced to confront the stark reality of her actions. The silence was broken by the scrape of Amadi's chair against the floor as he stood, his expression unreadable. Without another word, he gestured for Leona to follow him, leading her into the quiet sanctity of his study. The door closed softly behind them, sealing them away from the watchful eyes of the others. Leona, no longer able to hold back the flood of emotions, collapsed into the nearest chair. Tears streamed down her face, her carefully applied makeup streaking as she buried her face in her hands. Her sobs were raw, unguarded, a stark contrast to the poised and polished woman she so often portrayed. Amadi, she choked out, lifting her tear-streaked face to meet his gaze. I'm sorry. I've been blind, cruel even. I see that now. Amadi stood by the window, his back to her, staring out at the city lights that twinkled in the distance. His hands were clasped behind him, his shoulders stiff with the weight of the moment. He didn't respond immediately, the silence between them growing heavier with each passing second. I never meant to hurt you, Leona continued, her voice trembling. I didn't see it before, but now I understand what you've been trying to show me. I've been so caught up in appearances, in keeping up this perfect image, that I forgot what truly matters. Please, Amadi, I can change. I want to change. Her words were filled with remorse, each one carrying the weight of her shame and desperation. But Amadi remained silent, his expression unreadable as he finally turned to face her. His eyes, once so full of love and admiration for her, now held a mixture of sadness and uncertainty. Leona, he said quietly, his voice steady but tinged with sorrow. Do you know what hurts the most? It's not just what you did to my uncle. It's what it says about who you are when no one is watching. I've spent years believing in the woman I thought you were, only to discover a side of you I never imagined. Leona flinched at his words, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. I know, she whispered. I've failed you. But isn't love about forgiving, about growing together? I need you to believe in me, Amadi. Give me the chance to prove that I can be better. Amadi sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair as he wrestled with his emotions. Forgiveness isn't the issue, he said, after a long pause. The question is whether I can trust you again, whether we can rebuild something real after everything that's happened. Leona rose from her chair, crossing the room to stand before him. She reached out, hesitating for a moment before gently taking his hands in hers. Please, she said, her voice barely above a whisper, don't give up on us. I love you, Amadi. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. Amadi looked down at their intertwined hands, his mind a storm of conflicting emotions. He saw the pain in her eyes, the sincerity in her words. But he also saw the wounds her actions had left on his heart, the cracks in the foundation of their love. The choice before him was a heavy one. To forgive her and rebuild would require more than just words. It would demand time, effort, and a leap of faith. To walk away would mean letting go of the love they had shared, a love he had once believed was unshakable. As the moments stretched on, Amadi knew that whatever decision he made would shape not only their future, but also his own. The question wasn't just whether he could forgive her, but whether their love was strong enough to survive the truth. The garden was cloaked in twilight, the last hues of the setting sun fading into the dark embrace of the evening. A gentle breeze whispered through the trees, carrying with it the scent of blooming jasmine. Amadi sat on a wrought-iron bench, his elbows resting on his knees, his head bowed in thought. Around him, the world seemed still, as if the very air held its breath, waiting for him to make his choice. The soft glow of lanterns cast flickering shadows across the cobblestone path, but Amadi barely noticed. His mind was a storm, his heart heavy with the weight of the decision before him. He closed his eyes, and the memories came unbidden, like waves crashing against the shore. Leona, her hair tousled by the wind, laughing as Amadi chased her along the beach during their honeymoon. The two of them dancing in their living room late at night, the soft glow of the city lights streaming through the windows. Her hand in his, warm and steady, as they celebrated his first big business deal together. In another memory, she sits beside him on a picnic blanket in the countryside, her eyes bright as she talks about their dreams for the future. "No matter what," she had said, her voice full of conviction, "we'll always have each other." The screen lingers on her smile, radiant and sincere, before the memories shift. Amadi's eyes opened slowly, and he exhaled a shaky breath. Trust, once broken, was a fragile thing, like a porcelain vase shattered on the ground. It could be pieced together, but the cracks would always remain, a testament to what had been lost. He leaned back against the bench, his eyes searching the night sky for answers. Could he see her remorse as genuine? He replayed her words in his mind, her tears, the way her voice had trembled when she pleaded for another chance. Was it possible to rebuild what they had, or would their love always carry the shadow of this betrayal? She says she wants to change. But can people truly change, or do they only hide their flaws until they can't anymore? And what if I give her this chance only to be hurt again? His thoughts churned, torn between the depth of his love for her and the pain her actions had caused. He thought of Papa Udo's words. Kindness is not meant for the stage. It is meant for the unseen moments, for those who cannot offer you anything in return. The truth of those words resonated deeply, a reminder of the values he held dear. But then, there was the love they had shared, the memories that still lingered like embers of a fire that refused to die. Did those moments mean nothing? Or were they proof that something real had existed between us, something worth fighting for? Amadi weighed the depth of his love against the weight of Leona's betrayal. The scales wavered, tipping first one way, then the other. Could he see her remorse as genuine? Could he trust her to walk the path of change she claimed to desire? And even if he could, was he willing to shoulder the effort it would take to mend what was broken? The rustling of leaves pulled him from his thoughts. He looked up to find Leona standing a few feet away, her silhouette outlined by the soft light from the house. Her expression was hesitant, her eyes searching his face for a sign of what he was feeling. "Amadi," she said softly, her voice carrying a vulnerability he hadn't often heard. I didn't want to disturb you, but I couldn't sit inside, not knowing what you're thinking. Please say something." Amadi studied her for a long moment, his emotions a tempest threatening to spill over. The question loomed large in his mind. Was there a path forward for their marriage? The air between them was thick with unspoken words, a fragile silence punctuated only by the soft rustling of leaves. Amadi's gaze lingered on Leona's face, searching for something. Truth, perhaps, or the assurance that her remorse was real. Leona, her hands trembling at her sides, looked back at him with eyes that shimmered with unshed tears. It was a moment suspended in time, a crossroads where their choices would shape not just their relationship, but the people they would become. The hidden stranger in our lives is not always someone else, it is often the part of ourselves we fail to see. For Amadi, the stranger was his own reluctance to confront the cracks in the perfection he once believed in. For Leona, it was the blindness to the ways her actions, however small, reflected the truest parts of her character. Amadi's voice broke the silence, low and measured. Leona, this isn't just about what you did to Papa Udo. It's about what it revealed. About you, about us, about the life we've built. I've spent days trying to reconcile the woman I fell in love with and the woman I've seen these past weeks. Leona's breath hitched, and she stepped closer, her voice trembling but resolute. And I've spent those same days confronting parts of myself I didn't want to see. You were right, Amadi. I was wrong. I've been living in a world where appearances mattered more than truth, where kindness was reserved only for those I thought could give something back. But I don't want to be that person anymore. I want to be better, for you, for us, and for myself. Her vulnerability hung in the air, raw and unguarded. Amadi felt the weight of her words, the sincerity behind them. He knew the journey ahead would not be easy. Trust could not be rebuilt overnight, and the wounds they carried would take time to heal. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw something he hadn't seen in weeks: hope. For Amadi and Leona, the journey to healing would be long and fraught with challenges. There would be moments of doubt and struggle, moments when the weight of their shared history threatened to overwhelm them. But in their vulnerability lay the hope of redemption, a chance to rebuild not what they had lost, but something stronger and more honest. Amadi reached for her hand, his touch gentle but firm. "If we do this," he said quietly, "it has to be real. No more masks, no more illusions. We face everything, good and bad, together." Leona nodded, tears spilling freely now, her voice steady despite the emotion coursing through her. "Together," she echoed. Their hands intertwined, a small but significant gesture, and the camera pulled back to reveal the two of them standing in the garden, surrounded by the quiet beauty of the night. So, dear viewer, who is the hidden stranger in your life? Is it someone you overlook, someone you dismiss? Or is it the part of yourself you've kept buried, too afraid to confront? And what might that hidden stranger reveal about who you truly are?